Joining me now, CNBC Washington correspondent Megan Casella, and Vaughn Hilliard is back with me. He decided to stick around. Thanks, Vaughn, and thank you, Megan. What is in this deal for the EU? Why take it?
That's a key question, and it's not a lot that's in there for the EU, and we've actually heard member states complaining about that today, complaining about their commission president for making this deal. One thing they do get, 15% tariffs, very substantial, but better than it could have been.
Right.
We've heard President Trump threatening 20% tariffs. He's talked about 30% tariffs. It's 15% almost entirely across the board, so that's good for most products and especially good for things like cars, pharmaceuticals, and semiconductors that also could have seen much steeper tariffs. But it is a lot higher than it once was. They are getting a little bit of certainty, and that's the main reason to make the deal.
So European officials today, they did acknowledge they don't really have the authority to make good on this $600 billion investment. Does that take a little bit of teeth out of this agreement? What do you make of that?
Absolutely. They did acknowledge that. They sort of said it's all going to be private investment. There's no public incentives. They're not doing anything to make sure they follow through on those commitments. Now, a White House administration official did tell reporters and confirm to me that the president reserves the right to increase that tariff back up if they don't follow through. That's for the EU or for any other country. So that takes some of the certainty out of it. And it just shows you that they're not putting anything in writing here. And it shows you just how shaky this framework is.
And Vaughn, to that point, this is just a framework of an agreement. Has the White House said any more details on how they plan to assess or enforce parts of this deal?
Right. We're still waiting for the details from the UK deal, from the Japan deal, and I'm not sure exactly when we're going to actually get that on detailed paper form here. But I think to Megan's point here, we're dealing with an administration that has shown a willingness to effectively cut through previous trade deals, right? The USMCA trade agreement, and say, we don't really care when this was supposed to be up. We're going to go forward with higher tariffs regardless. And I think that's where the head of the EU in her comments this weekend were notable. Number one, she said that it brings stability and it is practical. And 3.5 years more that the EU and the 27 member nations are going to have to work with this administration. It may very well be in their interest to have some sort of a standard to know that they can work off of for at least that period of time.
And the administration has apparently shown a willingness to extend its deadlines for certain trade. And I want to ask you, a 15% tariff on goods from Europe, what will that mean for consumers here in the U.S.?
Higher prices on a number of things. You mentioned before the EU is our largest trading partner by far, I would say. So I was just looking at the biggest things we take in from Europe. It's pharmaceuticals, medicine, cars, it's alcohol. Think about your French wine or your Italian wine. It's also sparkling water, luxury goods, some precious metals, some high-end art. And then the single biggest company that imports the most from Europe is IKEA. So think about your IKEA furniture. Everything.
Oh, no, not my IKEA furniture. Not my water fountain.
From low end to high end, it gets a little bit more expensive.
That's right. Moving into a college dorm will get much more pricey. Vaughn, switching gears to the talks underway in Stockholm today, what do we know? I understand they wrapped up for the day. What do we expect to happen next?
We expect there to be a day 2 of talks. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has already suggested that the August 12th deadline that the U.S. had stated that they had with China to not escalate those steep high tariffs again could very well be delayed if these conversations in Stockholm are fruitful. We are so far away from a trade deal that of a magnitude I think that this administration is looking for here. But at least Jamieson Greer, the U.S. trade representative, and him, they have left that day 1 of meetings here. And I think, though, it is a question here of just how long, what do they want to actually see? Because in terms of concrete deals, I think that with China specifically, it is going to take a lot, and yet they continue to push these tariffs down the road.
And Vaughn, in addition to the trade deadlines that we were talking about, the White House and President Trump made news on another deadline today when he was asked about the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin, he said his deadline that he had extended to Putin might be changing or could change based on his disappointment, as he referred to it. What else did he say?
Right. This actually happened after, I think, 2 notable events. One, there were 300 drones launched from Russia into Ukraine overnight. And the second part of this, going back to the trade conversation with the EU has been putting pressure on the Trump administration to continue to provide aid and commitment to Ukraine long term. And look where we find ourselves. The president of the United States suggesting that Russia doesn't have the 50-day deadline to make moves toward a ceasefire and end of this war like they did. That would have been the beginning of September. But instead, it's a much shorter timeline. At least that's what the White House is saying. Take a listen.
Yeah. I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made.
Now, we know there's bipartisan support in the Senate to push forward a bill for the president to sign. The president says he could do this unilaterally if he wanted, but essentially it would be secondary tariffs. 100% tariffs is what the president had suggested 2 weeks ago. Over in the Senate, they want to do it 500% secondary tariff on Russian oil and gas that is going to particularly China and India here. And so what does the president actually move? He's threatened Russia for a couple months now, but today here seemingly at least drawing his own timeline a little shorter.
That's right. A lot of threats. You know, Megan,
back
big
to
picture
2
of this for
weeks.
us when it comes to tariffs. There have been so many shifting deadlines here. The markets, though, they're still shrugging it off. They're playing it cool.
Surprisingly,
Yeah.
they are. And that's in spite of the different threats that we've seen him follow through on now. Not only the Russian secondary tariffs, but the latest one being the global baseline tariff of 15 or 20%, doubling that from the 10% that he already put in place, which comes on top of anything that was already in place even before he took office. So everything gets a little bit more expensive, and yet markets seem to think this is better than what they thought it could be. And I think at this point, they're just looking for any degree of certainty that we can all sort of move on. I'm skeptical. I think that even once he strikes deals with all of these countries, he might go back on them. There might be new things to negotiate, but they just like the idea that maybe we're towards the end of the road on tariffs. And so for now, they think it's okay.
Megan Casella, Vaughn Hilliard, thank you both.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or
That's great. I just don't want them to touch my coffee. I just want the price of coffee to go down. That's all I care about. Everything else is just, I don't give a shit about. Tariffs.
Does Donald Trump know who pays the tariffs? The answer is no, but it seems as though even Scott Bessent is at least paying lip service to the idea that it is not the importers of foreign products and goods that pay the tariffs. I don't know if you've ever seen someone be so confidently wrong about basic economics, but Donald Trump's Scott Bessent, hedge fund guy, was on Morning Joe this morning, and he really tried to deny one of the most straightforward concepts in trade policy. He was asked, does Donald Trump realize that the consumer ultimately pays the tariffs? And Bessent disagrees. Now, my question to you is, does Bessent really not know who pays the tariffs? Or does Bessent have to say what he says in this video because it's what Donald Trump needs him to say? Let's take a listen.
I do know that the tariffs, the cost of tariffs on automobiles, which will begin, I don't know, August 1st or whatever, will be paid by people like me, the consumer. The question is, does the president realize the consumer pays the tariffs?
And just so everybody knows, the reason the question is being asked is because Trump regularly says we are taking in billions in tariffs from other countries. And of course, that is not who pays the tariffs.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with that. Is who pays the tariffs is a choice. And what we've seen thus far is that the manufacturers are eating a substantial portion of the tariffs and taking it into their profit margins. So you might see, for instance, Toyota hasn't raised prices, and they may choose to go for market share rather than raising prices.
Are you, it's been...
All right. So this isn't how things work in two different ways. There's the question of, in a literal sense, who hands over the cash for the tariffs. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Then there's the question of what sorts of adjustments, dynamic adjustments to pricing are there, such that the cost of tariffs may be passed on or borne by someone different than the party actually paying them. So let's really explain this in the simplest terms, but in the most direct terms possible. A tariff is a tax on imports paid by the importer. You put a tariff on if the United States puts a tariff on Chinese steel, the Chinese steel company is not paying that import tax. When the products arrive at American shores, in order to release the products to the company, the importing company forks over the money for the tariffs. That's That's in a literal sense who is paying it. The money goes from American business to American government. The tariff is paid by the importer. Now, it is true that the importer has some choices. The importer could say, well, we've paid a tariff, so we are now going to raise the prices of our finished good and pass that along to the consumer. If the importer pays more for Chinese steel, whatever they're building with that steel might be sold for more money to the end user, to the consumer. The other possibility is that the importer could cut costs somewhere else. If they do cut costs somewhere else to try to keep the price the same, we're paying more on the imported steel, let's cut costs elsewhere. Those cost-cutting measures could still hurt an American company. They might say, well, you know what? We are going to have to go with a cheaper version of the American components. That hurts an American company. It is still borne by that American company that now is selling less stuff to the importer. So it's being borne that way by Americans. Obviously, if the cost is passed on just to the consumer, that's who ultimately is paying the tariff. Now, there is another possibility. There's actually a couple other possibilities. Besant is suggesting, well, the importer can just absorb it. The importer could say, yes, I'm paying more for the Chinese steel, but I'll just accept a lower profit. I won't pass that along. I won't pass the increased cost along to the consumer. I won't cut spending somewhere else and hurt some American supplier. I'm just going to absorb that. But basic capitalism, which people like Scott Besant claim to subscribe to, should understand that if resource costs go up, which is what happened when you tariff goods, it makes them more expensive. Manufacturers do not eat those costs indefinitely. The costs could be eaten in the short term by them cutting into profit margins. But in modern capitalism, which Scott Besant says is the holy grail of how to organize an economy, shareholders do not accept lower profit margins. They want growth. They want returns. And if the margins start to shrink, stock prices are going to fall. Executives will get replaced. People will panic. Individuals will be laid off. They will have less money to then spend in the economy. And so you ultimately still get that economic damage somewhere. Now, let me give you another possibility, and this is another one that's been proposed. It's conceivable that if the United States puts a tariff on Chinese steel, yes, the American company pays the tariff, but they could go to the Chinese company and say, listen, we just got hit with this tariff here in the United States. Since we now have to pay a 25% tariff on the Chinese steel, we need you, the Chinese company, to sell us the steel for 25% less. This is the glorious process that Trump and many others are hoping for, which is, if they even understand that the tariffs are paid by the American company, we'll pay 25%, but we're going to get a 25% discount from China because the Chinese company isn't going to want to lose our business. Unfortunately, that is, number one, not what's happening. And number two, that only really works if we have the Chinese supplier over a barrel. But we really need that Chinese supplier more than they need the United States as a customer in many situations. And so that longer term way in which over time the exporting country might foot some of the bill for the tariffs, it's certainly not happening now. And in the position that China's in, it's probably not going to happen at all. So Besant's not even willing to admit it. I think Besant probably does really know the truth about who pays the tariffs, but he's in a position where he can't just acknowledge that because it's not what Trump has directed him to do. Sad that to placate the orange leader, these guys have to lie. And of course, horrible that they're willing to do so.
I want to bring in Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times and MSNBC political analyst. Chuck Rosenberg is former U.S. attorney, former senior FBI official, and an MSNBC legal analyst. With me here in studio, former Washington Post national columnist Philip Bump, and Michael Hardaway is former communications director and spokesman for House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Okay, let's start with the law, Chuck. Gabbard says the information she's put out amounts to, and these are her words, new evidence of the most egregious weaponization and politicization of intelligence in American history. Is that what you see?
Well, good for her, Chris. I mean, waving a document in front of a television camera doesn't make it authentic or valid or truthful or accurate. And this may sound incredibly quaint, but if you actually want to charge someone with a crime, try them and convict them, you need this pesky little thing called evidence. And evidence under the federal rules would have to be reliable, relevant, and admissible. So my way of...
That's the funny thing about this is all just fucking distraction. This is all to distract us from the point that Trump could possibly pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. This is just a distraction.
Thinking a House committee report, whether authored by Democrats or Republicans, don't meet any of those standards, and I would discount it entirely.
So, Philip, this is something the president has been promising for years, that pesky thing called evidence. And I want to play some of what we've heard over the years. Take a listen.
The concept of Russia with respect to us is a total phony story.
Meaning the Trump campaign.
Of course it's a total phony story. We have to find out what happened. I'd love to find out what happened.
But you don't think it's
I can tell you one
Russians?
thing. It had nothing to do with us.
Looks like a very serious event, but we'll find out. When they look at the documents, I think people are going to see a lot of bad things happen.
There's tremendous evidence right now as to how unfairly treated I was. President Obama and Biden spied on my campaign. It's never happened in history. They are trying to steal the election, just like they did it last time with spying, and we caught them, and that included President Obama.
Again,
President Obama.
none of the investigations ever showed anything that would support anything he just said there. So why, after all these years, after all these investigations, are we back at the same point with the president promising something that he has never been able to deliver?
I would say there's three reasons. The first is that his base has been inculcated in this idea that Barack Obama is just the worst political actor there's ever been, stoked by Donald Trump, and are eager to see vengeance enacted upon Obama and his allies. The second reason is that Trump himself feels very slighted by this. He's been angry about this for a long time. You know, the 2016 election, he got mad about Russia. 2020 election, he got mad about the fact that he lost. He, as president now, he's trying to use his power to try and get back at everyone who he thinks caused those things. But the third reason is Jeffrey Epstein, right? The reason this is happening now is always going to happen. Like, let's be clear. You saw it right there. He's very mad about this, so this is going to happen. The reason it's happening now is because he wants people not to pay attention to Jeffrey Epstein. He said so explicitly, both yesterday at the White House and speaking to legislators.
Peter, you've covered both President Trump and President Obama. As the statement from the Obama office noted, they typically don't respond to what they call constant nonsense coming from the White House, but they did this time. Why this? Why this time?
Well, I think the attack on Obama is so over the top. You know, his not only using words like treason, not only.
Actually, like most Silicon Valley engineers, because I live in California, I have a very hard time just taking at face value what everyone says. My one exception is vaccines. That one I explicitly just straight up believe. I'm like, yeah, that's I don't need to dive into the studies on that. I just trust that. But outside of that, when people give me like political takes, I'm always just like, really? Like, is that what happened? Like, I remember in 2016, which is really what kickstarted a lot of it for me, everyone said, even the modelers said Hillary had a 92% chance of winning. And I went back and I looked at the polls and I was like, she was up by 2 nationally at the end of it, by 3 nationally in the polls at the end of it. Why are we surprised that she won by 2? She was up by 5 in Wisconsin, but that's actually up by only 3% in vote share. Why are we surprised that there was that type of error? That's what kickstarted it for me. And you know, I'm a Democrat. I don't hide the fact that I'm a Democrat. I don't vote for Republicans, but others that split ticket do. And I find that interacting with them and having them check my analysis is really important because there's enough partisan people who work for the party, who are, you know, beholden to the party. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm not adding any value in that. My value is because I have a day job, I can tell people to go fuck themselves if they say, I don't like what you're saying here. You should be careful. The Democrats won't like to hear that.
Has that happened? Have people, like, you know, party insiders, people say, hey, we don't like what you're saying here, or hey, you should take a look at this or that?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah. But I mean, like, I just don't listen. Like, sometimes members of Congress are like, why don't you RT this? And I'm like, I don't agree with it. Why would I retweet you?
Yeah. Well, we're obviously seeing signs of ideological capture within what are supposed to be more sober elements of the Democratic Party. Like it was reported that, they're in the process at the DNC of conducting the 2024 postmortem, but it was reported that they weren't going to consider, Biden or the timeline for Harris, like major factors that you think are outcome determinative. And it seems to me that the only reason they would even contemplate doing that is because they know if they look under the hood, they're going to see shit that they don't like. And you can't have an accurate autopsy unless you're willing to actually just follow the evidence. So it's good that, people like you are out there providing sober analysis, even if they don't want to hear it.
Can I go a little harder, Josiah? I just want to say part of that postmortem stuff is happening now with the Hunter Biden and Jamie Harrison of the world. I want to go a little harder and say I take great umbrage with the way that some Democrats have reacted to the loss. And people, I like the Hunter Biden interview. I thought he, in some respects, he was funny and chill and personable. But his whole painting that there was this massive betrayal, especially with what just Laksha just said about. I mean, you're fairly certain that if we had Joe Biden on the ticket, we'd be talking about potentially a red Maine, potentially a red New Jersey. I think that there are massive stakes here, and if you're not taking seriously the data as a postmortem, or if you're trying to push these really awful narratives about how the Democrats owed it to Joe Biden to stick it through and see what happens and roll the dice, I take great umbrage with that.
No, I mean,
I think it's also. I was just going to say, to Pisco's point, one addition to that I find to.
I wouldn't say you owed it to anybody. You don't owe it to to Joe Biden to be loyal. I did think that there was something at stake, and a lot of people chose to. I don't want to call it selfish, but a lot of people chose to go against their best interest, and you just look at this on the other side, and I know people hate it, but if the roles were reversed, there would be no Republican talking about Donald Trump's cognitive decline. They would only support Donald Trump. They would vote, everything would be poor Donald Trump. But here on our side, on the Democratic side, we hold each other accountable. We hold each other to a standard. Sometimes I feel like at our own detriment.
To be a little extraordinary about Hunter Biden's claims there is that Biden's own internal polling, his own managed internal polling, showed him completely underwater, totally fucking underwater, right? I mean, and I understand that there could be some counterfactual argument of well, that was polling that was over the summer, and you still have 5 months to go, and things could have regressed to some, there could be a sine curve here that we're following, but I mean, come on, that's insensible. As soon as Kamala becomes the nominee, you see the polls, that was what caused the polls to immediately start to tighten significantly by a really large margin, right? So it just seems clear that directionally, a big thing was literally just the fact that Joe Biden was the candidate as to why the Democrats were polling so badly.
I mean, look, I think it cannot be overstated that this was a Biden-specific problem, because I can show you poll after poll of Senate nominees, of House races and whatnot. And, when Biden was at his nadir, Ruben Gallego was still leading in Arizona. Okay? When Biden was trailing in states like Pennsylvania at that time, right? Bob Casey was still more than competitive. When Biden was trailing places like Michigan, like Wisconsin, like Nevada, Jackie Rosen and co. were still up. This was a Biden-specific problem. And Nate Cohn pointed it out at the time too, right? The weakness that Democrats have induced was one of their own making. They did not need Biden on the ticket, but everyone kind of doubled down because no one wanted to tell the emperor that he had no clothes. And I get it, because when he decides to run again, how are you going to do that? But that's what ended up happening.
No, that's bullshit. I remember distinctively Joe Biden, literally everybody in the fucking Democrat DNC, they called him out and said, I don't think he can do it, especially after the fucking debate. He literally told people, yo, if you don't think I can do this, see me at the primary. He literally called people out and said, see him at the primary. That was ample opportunity for any Democrat who thought that they could do the job, or thought that Joe Biden doing it was not the thing to do, to step up. None of them happened. Nobody showed up. Nobody showed up at the DNC.
I think a lot of people placed personal loyalty to Biden above just a very cold calculation about what represented the best chance for the Democrats in 2024. And I think a lot of people have the view that if you acknowledge what you're saying, these plain truths about Biden's sort of unique weakness as a candidate relative to the other candidates, I feel like in part they think that that's like a it's a betrayal of Biden. It's a refusal to acknowledge that he actually was a pretty fucking decent president on a number of issues. And to me, this is just such a flawed way of looking at politics. Like, I don't think we should be loyal to any particular nominee. And like to Pisco's point, you know, if I was Joe Biden, I would be glad to see my son sticking up for me in that way. And he did say a lot of stuff that I thought was like really based and correct. In terms of crediting his dad for doing really good stuff. But the whole idea that, you know, the party leadership betrayed him by pushing him out, I think that betrays a sort of egocentric, self-centered view of politics. Like, you should put the party and the country above, you know, your own sort of selfish desire to have a good legacy, I guess.
Do you believe that you owe the people something as a politician?
I honestly feel I believe Biden when he said the only reason that he ran is because he thought that he was the only one that could beat Donald Trump. I believe that he thought that. You could say ego, I guess, on that one, but I don't think it. I think it was more so. I guess you're right.
Do you believe that the people owe you something? I think that's the central question here when I look at Joe Biden's actions post-debate, when it was clear that people didn't have the faith in him, right? Do you owe the people something? Do you owe the nation something? Or does the nation owe you something? And I think Biden's circle saw it very much as the nation owed him something, because everything was about, this is about the story of Joe Biden. And I was like, does he realize this thing has consequences?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because when it comes to electoralism, I actually think that
there were consequences. The consequence was Donald Trump. That was the fucking consequence. I guess I don't understand that line. Maybe I'm not tracking. But that was the consequence. The consequence was having Donald Trump as the president of the United States. The consequence was Thanos, and he thought that he was the only one or the best person that can beat him. Was he right? I don't know. We wouldn't know. He dropped out, what is it, like September or some shit like that? After a debate that nobody paid attention to. They only focused on how he talked, how fast he talked. And it's like, and they never really actually paid attention to the actual details. See, if a lot of more Democrats would have pointed out, yeah, Joe Biden you sounded kind of slow there, but at the same time pointed out the fact that Donald Trump, for like the umpteenth time, refused to answer questions or tell us a fucking plan of what he was going to do for the country. But instead, we got together and we said, oh my God, did you see Joe Biden? Did you see Joe Biden? You know, he could barely talk. He stuttered. He sounds like an 80-plus-year-old man. Like,
there has to be a degree of reciprocity, and it's interesting because we'll probably talk about this at some point because Hutch, you know, kind of organized this interview. I want him to take the lead, but at some point, you know, you retweeted an analysis, and it might have been by a colleague of yours. I was looking for it about how the Biden administration is viewed as a total failure. And what's interesting about that, given that, you know, one of your positions is that the electorate is looking for people to deliver material results, at some point we have to grapple with the fact that legislatively, Biden was a more successful president than Donald Trump, and yet he was not rewarded for his legislative accomplishments. And so I want to explore that, because to me, even though I don't have a personal loyalty to Biden, he's a means to an end. There has to be a degree of reciprocity in that if you elect somebody and they deliver results, then you need to vote for them again, or their party again, empower the party again, so they can continue to deliver results. And that's how you get that feedback loop of continued success. And I don't know, Hutch, if I'm jumping the gun there, but I know at one point that's something I would like to talk about, like to grapple with.
We can jump into that. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me, I think it's pretty well established here that I don't vote for Republicans. I voted Democrat straight ticket all my life, and I plan to do that for 26 and 28. So let's just contextualize what I'm about to say with this.
Sure.
What did Joe Biden deliver to the average voter that would make them excuse 8% inflation? Let's just start with that. What did Joe Biden deliver to people that they saw as a concrete result of his policies that would make them excuse 8% inflation?
The closest thing I would be able to say would be the checks in the American Rescue Plan, but if those are
that's
basically
erased by 8% inflation, like I don't think you could point to like
sure,
specific
but they also
tangible
got checks
results.
under Trump, and you can say it was a Democratic Congress, but the fact is people associate the policy with the president, not with the Congress.
Right.
The child tax credit would be, I think, something that was like very beneficial for millions of families.
It was enhanced. It was even bigger than the one provided by Trump.
The student loan relief was a big thing for like 4 to 5 million people who got their loans wiped out. But I mean, I take your point.
Even
I
the
think- I
vaccine
think that-
rollout, I would say too, just like overall as a policy prescription, the economy was able to open back up because President Biden had a much more competent and expansive.
It's like, I don't think he's ever going to give. I don't know who this person is, but it's like you have to give Joe Biden credit. My mic is too. Like you have to give Joe Biden credit for getting us out that fucking pandemic. You have to. Like I don't see how. I don't know. Like the American Rescue Plan is probably the biggest thing. I think that when we look back at Joe Biden's presidency, we're going to forget those 2 years. We're going to forget about the COVID pandemic and the state of our economy and how fucked up our economy was because of COVID-19 and how it was dealt with. We were fortunate enough to be able to rebound the way that we did, but we did that with Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. I wouldn't have had faith with Donald Trump if we had to go at it with him. Because he didn't understand policy.
Of vaccine rollout than what we had under Trump. Like,
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
The instinctual pushback to Laksha would be like, well, that wasn't Biden's fault. But I don't even think you're saying that. I think you're just
No, he's not.
like,
Yeah.
I think you're speaking to people's perceptions. So like if somebody is president and you go to the grocery store and things cost 8% more than they did, a few months ago or something like that, 90% of Americans are going to just vote the president, and that's just something that you have to grapple with. And we've talked about it on the podcast. His whole reframing of that, like,
so what do we do? Do we keep as Democrats just keep pounding and pounding and pounding on it, just making sure people know that Joe Biden was the cause of 8% inflation, but just not remember the fact that, hey, if it wasn't for Joe Biden, our economy might be even more shit than it actually is? Like, I'm confused. What do we do with that?
Celebrating
what do
the
we
fact
do with
that
that knowledge?
we did less bad than every other country,
Yes.
I think was a huge mistake. Like branding the whole Bidenomics thing was just a fantastic.
No, that's not a huge mistake. That's a fucking good thing. For us to actually rebound better than any other country, that's a good thing. That's not something that we could just be like, oh, it's a fucking accomplishment. The COVID-19 virus killed off millions of people. It literally tanked everybody's economy. It's really good. This is what we can't just like, it's a give and take. You can't just be like, okay, well, yeah, let's credit him, but let's pull it back a bit. No, fuck that. If this was Donald Trump, Republicans would be like fucking singing to the high moons.
Take error, I think, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with that. So this is the thing, right? Like, you may not think it's fair, and by you, I just mean like the president. He may not think it's fair that people are blaming him for 8% inflation, but at the end of the day, the average person says, right, like, look, I don't have the power to fix the grocery prices, but if one person in the country does, at least the president should be able to do something about it. Now,
That means
it may not
nothing.
be the case that he could. It is not the case that he could in a lot of places. But not only did they not see any change other than prices going really far up in that sense, they also saw the president saying, the economy is working. It's really great. Everything is good. And that, it's like, all right, don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. That's where it comes from, right? Like, it was.
So you don't buy vibe session, because I think that there's some vibe session stuff for sure. Like, so let me give you an example. I think that when people, for example, when inflation was coming back down to a more normal rate, people didn't really give Biden much credit for that. Growth was, we had real wage growth after a time. Maybe what you're saying is that people view the kind of inflation, and I would agree with you, as like a real problem and something that's sticky and it's not their fault, where they would attribute like a raise to their own good conduct, right, as opposed to the good workings of the economy. But do you think that there's any of that vibe session going on? I mean, we had decent growth. We had a good recovery. We never had massive unemployment. So we didn't really have a recession. What are your thoughts?
Like, that's my big thing. If there was a recession, I would 100% agree with this person. But there wasn't a recession. Like, we have to give credit where credit is due. Like, I understand the optics. 8% inflation. Who's the president? Joe Biden. Okay, fuck you. I'm not, I hate you, whatever. I get that. But we have to understand. I hate this because, like, who's harmful at this point? Is it Joe Biden or is it the people with platforms?
So I don't think politics stops at the water's edge, right? If you look internationally, every single incumbent government in the world got battered post-COVID. The inflation that was worldwide was terrible. And it's important to note this because it helps you contextualize globally what's going on. And the same tensions that happen globally also started happening in the United States. That's number one, to just contextualize all of this with. But number two, when it comes to was there a vibe session? Well, I would say, yes, the US's economy did better than every other country's, but real wages didn't go up for 2 years. If you are an American, you are expecting, especially when you see these metrics like, hey, we're growing in power relative to Japan, to the UK, to Germany, to Italy. If you see all of that, your expectation is that your quality of life continues to improve. You don't want to spend 2 years of your life in like a static pattern.
Can I ask a quick
I don't like
follow-up
that.
on the Pisco thing here? Because it's interesting, like some of this is coming back to me. I take your point about the lack of advancement, at least for the first 2 years under Biden, in like critical metrics, which really hit close to home. What about towards the election cycle, though, in 2024, when we kept hearing, I was actually surprised that that Republicans were going with this and doubling down on it. Are you better off in 2024 than you were in 2020? And most economists would say, well, fuck no, you weren't. Like, so how? That's where I'm curious to Pisco's point. Do you? Clearly, there has to be some sort of memory hole of what happened in 2020, which was virtually worse on at least 9 out of 10 metrics, right? Where did that confusion come in, or that disconnect, that dissonance? Because so many people are like, actually, yeah, by comparison to 2024, 2020 at the height of COVID was actually kind of a cakewalk.
So I think there's two important things. Number one is that what kickstarted Biden's decline, right? Like Afghanistan, but then what compounded it was
that was Trump. Okay.
The Delta variant for COVID, which made people think, hey, you promised this would be over. What the hell, man? And then inflation got really, really bad. That built the fuse. That built the fire.
I'm so confused, like with this. It's like when viruses mutate, I don't think anybody has a control over the virus. Like if it mutates, that's how it happens. I think the goal of the president of the United States is to make sure that we're vaccinated. That's what vaccines are for, to actually fight that shit. And when a virus mutates, maybe the vaccines don't work after the mutation or the variants, which is understandable. I get it. That's just how it works. But I'm like, it's not as if he's like, okay, well, it's not as if he's like, he knows it's going to, fucking mutate into some mutant or whatever the fuck. This is a fucking crazy ass take. It just sounds like just no credit. Biden bad. I mean, like, what the fuck are we talking about? I was here 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. I was here. What the fuck?
Firecrackers, that really laid the TNT out. And then after that, everyone was pissed. And now things may start to improve. But one of the things we find in elections is that like the first 2 years of GDP and the first 3 years of GDP for a president are actually incredibly important, because that's what allows perception to bake in. After that, you're trying to change people's perceptions, and even if the fourth year's economy is good, they're already pissed off. And
what
then
about Reagan? Can you just say, that's very interesting you said that. I always hear, maybe I'm wrong about this, that Reagan had, he started off with a period of economic recession, and he didn't really
inherit from President Carter. Yeah.
Right. So can you say more about that? Or are you saying that maybe it was a different situation because it's like Obama, where he kind of inherits the problem that's already there?
No, this is a great one. Okay, so the real story with Reagan is this, right? In 1980, he inherited one of the worst economies that any president has ever inherited. And this was not something that the public would give the president a mulligan for, because with COVID, that was the one weird case where COVID actually was a massive boon incumbency-wise to governments everywhere. Because who did the American people blame for COVID? They blamed China.
China, yeah.
Right? They saw Trump give stimulus checks, and they're like, the Chinese people did this, or the Chinese government did this, and they started blaming them. That was the median voter in America. COVID gave a huge incumbency bump as people rallied around the flag. And people felt that the economy before COVID, which again, they gave Trump a mulligan for in terms of its cause, the economy before COVID was one of the strongest economies in American history. The economy that Ronald Reagan inherited was one of the worst in recent American history. By 1984, the economy that Reagan was presiding over was the best in American history. And so the delta between what Reagan took power with and what he was running on in 1984 was so astronomically wide that, yeah, he had some pretty terrible first 2 years. But by 84, the economy was so good that, yeah, he was able to actually
get over that hump, right?
Right. And with Biden, the change was not that immense, right? It's important to remember that the US economy, a lot of it had actually recovered by like January 2020 or 2021, right? Like we were not dealing with like Great Depression levels. The stock market crash had recovered by then. It was already surging again. We were not dealing with Jimmy Carter levels. That's something that they saw come up under Biden. Inflation did not start at 8% under Joe Biden. And then when it got better, people were like, yeah, but you're the one that started this mess.
The median family, their net wealth went up during 2020 because
is that true? Did Joe Biden start at 8% increase in inflation? I mean, like I can understand. I understand where he's going, and I get it. It seems more so about optics. If I'm a voter and you're telling me, and I don't know shit about politics, I don't pay attention. All I know is money's leaving my pocket, and I ask who's responsible. They say inflation. I look at who's in charge of inflation. The President of the United States. Okay, the President of the United States is fucking with my wallet. Therefore, I no longer support the President of the United States, or I'm going to vote against him. I get the optics of it, right? But like, I want to know the solution to showing people that it doesn't fucking matter. You have to actually I think people just voters need to be more smart at this point, because these conversations mean less and less and less and less if the voters aren't actually educated. So when we're doing when I'm hearing things, it's like Joe Biden bad, Joe Biden this, Joe Biden that. Fine, okay, we understand that. But why did they actually vote? Did you honestly think that between the two people, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, that Donald Trump was more qualified at that point in time to be the president of the United States? Somebody who knows nothing about diplomacy, knows nothing about policy, someone who's regularly able to bend a knee at any point in time, who goes back on their word. Like we all know what Joe Biden was on Gaza, Israel and Gaza. I don't think that situation would have changed, but I don't think that Netanyahu would have been invited to the fucking White House for tea and crumpets. So it's like, for me, it's I feel as if, okay, I get it. I understand where people are going with this, but I honestly feel like it's about time that we stop babying the fucking voters, and they need to actually be educated now. So I kind of feel like these type of conversations aren't as productive now.
We had such a generous stimulus program in this country. But I want to pivot a little bit to like a couple different things. So like, first I want to get into sort of like the story of America right now. And I want to sort of pick your brain, Laksha, on what you think the data show in terms of like the party's trajectories. Like, what do you think is going on with the country? And then also on a more granular level, like what's going on in each party. And then I want to get into electoral strategy, because this is something that we've had some disagreements on in the past on this podcast. And I wanted to get your sort of feedback. So first of all, why don't you tell me about like what do you think is happening in this country right now? Like, what do you make of the trends from 2024? Do you think these are sticky trends? Yeah, just your general thoughts.
Yeah, I think you could write a whole novel on inaccuracies about people trying to project trends forever. Do you remember 2020 when people said, hey, blue Texas is coming. It's gotten bluer for 3 cycles straight. Now we're left with Texas at R+14. Wonderful. Why do we get here? Right? So no, I don't think trends are sticky. I think what happened is people respond to material reality and information flows downstream of that. So my take really high, and instead of doing anything about it, he's played footsie with 1930s trade policy. And so as a result, you're seeing Trump's cost of living numbers be worse than any Republican president in modern history, because he has done absolutely nothing in people's view to help that. He's only compounded the problems that they faced.
Laksha, on that point, just real quick, and I've heard this, I think it was Harry Enton who did this, maybe you can confirm that I'm not crazy, that currently Trump's approval rating on inflation is worse or as bad with independents as it ever was under President Biden.
That is correct. That is entirely correct. Okay. Notice that in this conversation, as I've talked about the failures that the American people saw under President Biden, nowhere have I said that Trump 2025 is doing any better.
No. I hear you, but that's validation. That's encouraging to me because the four of us here, to one extent or another, believe that Trump is graded on a curve by the American people. So we're starting to see some data indicating that, no, they're just as pissed off with him about inflation as they were with Biden. That's
why I want to stick on that because you just said he's not, you don't think he is graded on a curve. Could you get into that? Because that's like a consensus here.
Yeah.
No, I think Trump is, to the extent that he's graded on a curve, you would say it's for the scandals that everyone else would be like, oh, that would end my career, right? Like the whole Access Hollywood tape is one thing, but then like the whole sharks and God knows what else he talked about at the rally, that would have been treated as like a campaign ender.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Right? Like hey, Herschel Walker, his entire campaign was like dogged by accusations of, well, not accusations, the reality of this guy is actually crazy, right? Like the whole
Mark Robinson in North Carolina
story, that Obama's best line was, you know, he had a great debate about, am I a vampire or a werewolf? And I had the same debate when I was 7. And that's the type of thing which Trump is excused from, because people are like, he's not a politician. He's kind of out there. He's kind of funny. I don't care.
That's what we mean. So you're saying they don't grade him on a curve for like the bread and butter issues that affect their daily lives.
Exactly. People are willing. So what Trump has discovered, in a sense, I like to say quote unquote discovered, but it's always been true, is that people are willing to excuse a lot if they think you're making their lives better.
Right.
And that is why Donald Trump, despite being weaker than a generic Republican, it is important to note this, he consistently underruns other Republicans. He does worse in polling than folks like Nikki Haley. But people do think that under his presidency, their lives got better up until what they viewed as the Chinese caused COVID. That's what the average American thinks. And so now this time around, they're not seeing that. And why you saw the Epstein files blow up is because Trump was using a lot of goodwill to weather those cultural scandals because people thought he's making my life better. Now, if he's not making your life better and you have a ton of chaos, what the hell is there that you're there for?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't think that he completely breaks the rules of gravity altogether? He's not unlocked the matrix code, even if he has some inherent advantages. So I have one point there to make on Trump, because you say he's not graded on a curve, and you say like, well, what could Biden have done to undo this like 8% inflation, and that there was this trend in 2020 of an incumbency advantage across the country, and but the whole point, right? That wasn't enough for Trump, you know, and notwithstanding the fact that there was an incumbency advantage in 2020 that you're pointing to, Trump lost. He outperformed what people would think, but like Trump is in a sense you know, as between the economy that you're saying that he was going to get credit for, that people's wealth was increasing, they weren't blaming him for the pandemic. How come he was undone in 2020 then? And is that an example that, sorry, 2020 he was Trump was undone, right? Trump lost. Why is it that in that election, when the factors arguably by your analysis are in his favor, that people nonetheless went against that advantage and picked Biden in that context?
So two things, right? It's important to remember Trump was not starting with a very high base of support. He started having lost the popular vote by 2 points to Hillary Clinton. He won because the Electoral College was in his favor. That was 2016. 2020 came around, he lost by 4.5. He actually lost 2 points of ground from 2016. And I want to note here that this is after a series of scandals that chipped away at every base of support that he had. First, you had the whole impeachment thing with Zelensky, which people did see as a, like, you should impeach him for that. Like, the public did not say, hey, don't impeach the guy. They were like, actually, that's kind of deserved.
Like 51%? What are we talking about? Like, are we saying the bare majority?
51%, but that's still something, right? Like, Bill Clinton's impeachment was very deeply underwater.
So was President Biden. So was Wasn't the polling around Biden's potential impeachment this last year? I don't think it ever got any popular support.
People didn't think that was something you could impeach a president over. Like being old is not a crime.
It was the Hunter Biden thing. That was the long-standing
Burisma
rumors
stuff,
of impeachment. From House Republicans. I never saw a poll where even that got popular support.
No, exactly. Because again, right, like a president has to be really unpopular to have impeachment levels, like to have people supporting his impeachment. And what's more, I said that the public didn't blame Trump for COVID, but they did blame him for his handling of it. They did blame him for a lot of things that he did in 2020, right? Like they blamed him a lot for handling COVID in the way that he did, which cost him among seniors, right? In terms of the whole corruption angle that really brought him down. And Trump was not shy on controversies or chaos or turnover in the first year. And Biden was a good candidate for 2020. I want to be clear on that. The Biden of 2024 is very different from the Biden of 2020. The Biden of 2020 was completely different. And he was someone that the electorate liked and trusted and said, you know, wasn't down with Hillary, but I do like this Joe Biden guy. And, you know, I trust him. I know he's a middle of the road dude. That's what they like. So basically, to your point, like the reason it was undone in 2020 was because Trump really was the guy in power and he made a lot of mistakes. In 24, they were judging Trump as the alternative and Biden as the guy in power.
Making mistakes.
Biden, exactly.
Okay.
When you're out
That's the funny thing. It's like when you have, Joe Biden didn't run against a completely different person. He ran against a president who had 4 years prior. In the previous 4 years, they said that he couldn't get the job done or he wasn't doing a good job. So they decided to vote Biden. And now Biden's headed out. You know, his only sin is being old. And now they want to put the guy that they said wasn't doing the job correctly in 2020 back in. I don't know. It's the voters. I know people say don't blame the voters, but I think now these days voters need to get scrutinized. I'm tired of the kid glove.
Power, you're out of sight, out of mind. You are the alternative. It is a referendum on the president. That's what happened here.
So let's get into the pressing issue here, because what everyone's talking about right now is the Democrats' historically low numbers. So I want you to sort of like walk us through.
Who fucking cares? Like, it's like who cares about the fucking Democratic low numbers? It's going to stay low and it's not going to go up. I don't think there's anything right now that the Democrats can actually do to bring those numbers back up. That's probably not going to go up until the midterms start to get closer and closer and closer when people are actually starting to pay more attention. Right now, no one gives a shit about that. I don't even know where they get these fucking polls.
Through what you think the data show on that. What do you think of the current narratives that are being espoused? And then we can get into the sort of differences that we've had here on the podcast in terms of electoral strategy.
Sure. I think broadly the data just shows that Democrats don't like Democrats. It's like, that's the number one thing. I mean, like, this is the first time in modern history that the Democratic Party's favorables have been underwater with Democratic voters. Now, one thing to note here is that this is not saying that Democrats are worse off among independents than the Republicans are. That's not true. And Democrats still lead the generic ballot. Democrats still win the national vote if the election was held today. What's happened is a bunch of people who have made politics their obsession and their life. And we are not exempt from that.
Not us.
So I was raising my hand like, Laksha, damn, calling us out here. Yeah.
They
an intervention to the audience. This is actually an intervention that Laksha is hosting for us. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but they absolutely are done with the Democratic Party's current leadership because they say you keep losing. Now, keep losing is kind of a funny term for losing one election by 2%, but
after 3 successful election cycles.
Yeah,
and Laksha, to be clear, you will be happy because all 4 of us, despite our varied frustrations with the Democratic Party, make it a point to emphasize on our show and our respective channels that this idea that the Democratic Party is just, that we're just losers and that we can't win elections is fucking dumb. We beat Trump in 2018 in the midterms. We beat him in 2020, the 2021 Senate runoffs. We dominated the 2023 off-year elections. Like, so you'll be happy to know that we make
agree with
that
that,
point.
Josiah. And I agree with that, Josiah. I don't think that we're perennial losers. I never made that point. I don't deny that some people probably think that right now, given the magnitude of the loss in 2024. So I'm not denying what Lakshya's saying at all.
It wasn't that big of a magnitude.
But I count myself among the people right now who disapproves of party leadership in the Democratic Party. And the reason I think that is because I think that the people who are leading the party are incompetent. But still, if you were to give me, a choice as between any generic Democrat, generic Republican, I would not even hesitate to put the Democrat there. And yeah. So, is that what's going on here? Is that it's just this whole Democratic infighting, and is that easily fixable by changing the people in charge?
Yeah, I mean, what's happened is the Democratic electorate has decided you guys have been in power for God knows how long. You're old enough to have sat behind Jesus Christ in third grade. Like, at this point, we want someone new, and we want new ideas, because we blame you for getting this guy back in power, because you said he's an existential threat to reality.
No, I'm not letting. Okay, I will not blame the Democratic Party for telling us the fucking truth. They went the entire campaign telling us every single fucking thing that you needed to know about Donald J. Trump and how of an existential omega level threat to democracy that he was. You were told this by your constituents. You were told this by your Senate, your Congress. You were told this by Kamala, by Joe. You were told this by every fucking logical fucking person on a platform that would scream it. This guy is an existential threat because of this. He showed you this in numerous debates. Like, I don't know. Why do we keep doing this shit? At some point, I'm not going to look at AOC and blame AOC. I'm not going to look at Pete Buttigieg and blame Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, or even fucking Hakeem Jeffries. I'm going to look at the voters, the people I go to the booth with, and ask themselves, are you fucking okay? Like, are you really okay with the state that everything is in right now? Are you really okay with just going to vote blue, or just going to the fucking polls and just being angry and not doing any fucking education whatsoever? You allowed yourself to get duped, either to not vote, either to be selfish, or either to go with the lesser of two evils or the greater of two evils. Like, this is so stupid that we voters keep getting bailed out of this shit, bro. They cost us this fucking election because of their stupidity. Donald Trump didn't win the election in 2024. I stand on that. Ignorance won Donald Trump the election in 2024.
Reality. You said you would do everything possible. And now you're passing his CR. You're passing his budget bill. You're doing all types of things, voting for his nominees. You're doing the types of things like confirming Marco Rubio by a 99-0 vote.
It's crazy.
Inconsistent with how you behaved. So did you just sell us a false bag of goods? Do you not believe what you said? What did you do? So what's happened here is the Democrats have sold their voters a bag of goods that didn't exist. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, and they're like, whoa, hang on. I didn't think this would ever come for me. Like, I never thought the leopards would eat my face, that type of thing. And so I don't look at this in the terms of, hey, Democrats are screwed forever and always. I actually have said, I think Democrats have a really high turnout coalition. These are people who score like 9s and 10s on partisanship and turnout scores. They will vote, and they will vote for the Democrat. And I think when push comes to shove, Democrats handily win the 26 midterms in terms of the popular vote. But I do not think that the Democratic Party as it is going to emerge from the 26 midterms looking quite like it does today. I think voters have made it clear. The Democratic voters have made it clear that they want a different face, that they want a different approach, that they want more of a fight. And how that happens, I'm not sure, but I don't think leadership can currently turn it around because they're too far up the creek and have realized that they're stranded. And now it's a question of damage limitation, because let's put it this way, right? Like, why was Zoran Mamdani the guy that emerged as the anti-Cuomo candidate? Why was it not Brad Lander, the guy who fit every single technocratic bill? Why was it Zoran? It's because Zoran offered something so radically different, so completely unique and new, that they were like, you know what, like, this is the guy we want to run against Cuomo. This is the guy we trust over Andrew Cuomo. That's who they consolidated behind. Yeah, Cuomo had bad negatives, but why was it Zoran that surged up? And to me, that is indicative of what's happening with the party, because the party slowly has moved more and more and more to the left in terms of its voters. Its politicians
haven't changed.
Its politicians have mostly approached 24. Yeah, they may have gotten more liberal in what they proposed in 2024 compared to 2015 or 2016, but the voters are much more liberal now than they were in 2024.
So, so we have another Joe Biden moment then, don't we? I mean, isn't this another moment of, well, you just said we're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, and they're too far gone for them to ever have any kind of comeback. So isn't this another Joe Biden moment? Don't we need to be calling on Schumer at all to step down?
We need some George Clooney op-eds. ASAP.
I mean, I've said I think it's time for Schumer to go. I don't actually think Schumer's done anything wrong in terms of helping Democrats stay in power, and here's why. By not having a government shutdown, you made all of the people who are going to vote in 2026 very mad. But the average person is not pissed off at the government shutting down now. And so they can be mad at Trump for a whole bunch of different stuff, and Democrats don't even give you the lane to attack them on shutting down the government. But that's also great for Democrats because it gives people another excuse to throw out Schumer. And Schumer is so confidently and so concretely associated with the old guard that I think it's time for him to go, because whether or not it's fair, what happens when a football team loses a game in extra time that they should have won and then lose again and lose again and lose again?
Yeah.
You sack the manager. It may not be fair, but you sack the manager.
You said something just. No, I'm
let
sorry. Go ahead.
it kind of jump in here.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think it helps to, because this is a great moment to kind of pivot into what Hutch was talking about, the general electoral strategy going forward. And I guess I'll do my best to, I'll at least summarize like my position. And I don't know how representative, I think we all have kind of slightly different perspectives. Obviously Hutch and I might be like the farthest apart. We represent like the universe of the podcast, I guess. And so one of my theories for like why the Democrats are so unpopular, number one, is on the margin. I think on the margin, things like your platform and like candidate charisma, the demographic like type of candidate that you propose, like I think these things like on the margin make a difference. You know, maybe they result in plus or minus between like 1 in 3 to 5% or something like that of the vote or something like that, right? Like your actual platform you run on and your vibes and stuff like that. I think that most of election results are based on these macroeconomic, like macro factors that aren't necessarily in your control. Like Kamala probably lost mostly for the reasons that you said: inflation, Biden's poor legacy. You could say like proto legacy at the time.
Bullshit. She lost for bullshit. That's basically what she lost for. She lost for bullshit. You're about to say a bunch of, respectfully, I think a bunch of nothing's about to come up as to why Kamala lost. It doesn't fucking matter at this point anymore. Like, it's fucking stupid. Oh, they're talking about the thing.
So we got some new polling data that just came in, y'all, and it is wild. So let me walk you through this here. First, Wall Street Journal, they say the following. Democrats get lowest rating from voters in 35 years. Republicans are seen as better at handling most issues that decide elections despite respondents' unease with Trump over the economy.
I honestly don't think it cares. Like I don't think it matters here, because again, even what I agreed with the last person from the last thing that we were just seeing is that Democratic turnout's going to be 10 times better. He's got to get in a fucking booth and vote. Stop being dickwads and go fucking vote. It's so simple. We dominate the popular vote every fucking time when we decide to go get our lazy asses off the fucking couch and go into your nearest fucking elementary school and fucking vote. It's so fucking simple.
Tariffs and foreign policy. So in other words, and this is true based on all the polling that we've seen, Trump is plummeting. Trump is imploding. His numbers are trash. He's underwater on literally every single issue, including immigration, which historically he's always been above water. So, but even though Trump is imploding, when you ask voters about the Democratic Party, they go, oh, I fucking hate him. I despise him. So Democratic leadership has
has this plan of let's sit back, let's chill, let's shut the fuck up, let's let Trump hang himself, let's let the Republicans hang themselves, and then we swoop in and save the day, right? Like, we don't have to lift a finger, and we're going to crush in the midterms. This is the mindset. Now, on the one hand, is it possible, if not likely, that Democrats will win the midterms? Yes, that's true. But on the other hand, if you actually were to care about stuff, campaign on stuff, make an argument, fight, then it wouldn't even be a question if you were going to win or not, and you would win in crushing margins. But they've actively made the decision to do nothing, to say nothing, to shut the fuck up and let the Republicans hang themselves. But clearly what they didn't realize is, you do know it's possible, right? That yes, Trump's numbers can implode and the Republican numbers can go down, but yours can go down even more. And that's where we are. So on this chart here, I mean, you could see it on the chart. You can see it. Democrats are minus 30 to Republicans only being minus 10. Let me walk you through some of this. The Democratic Party's image has eroded to its lowest point in more than 3 decades, according to a new Wall Street Journal poll, with voters seeing Republicans as better at handling most issues that decide elections.
Wait, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Where are these polls coming from? Like, I know these are credible polls, but I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would a Democratic voter just sit there and say, okay, well, yeah, I think a Republican is better at this. When I think about popularity, I don't give a shit about what other parties feel, or what people who not going to vote Democratic feel about the Democratic Party. I don't give a shit about how they feel about the Democratic Party. When I'm thinking of low numbers, I'm thinking of people who are Democrats who vote Democrat and how much faith they actually have in the Democratic Party. If you ask them a question and they say Republicans are better at that, then they're a fucking idiot, because they're not better at it. They just so happen to hold power right now because, anyways.
The new survey finds that 63% of voters hold an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. 63%. The highest share in journal polls dating to 1990, and 30 percentage points higher than the 33% who hold a favorable view. That is a far weaker assessment than voters give to either President Trump or the Republicans, who are viewed more unfavorably than favorably by 7 points and 11 points, respectively. A mere 8% of voters, 8%, view the Democrats very favorably, compared with 19% who show that level of enthusiasm for the GOP. So, more than double the number are very enthusiastic about Republicans. Why? Because Republicans, what do they always do? They super serve their base. And so the base is rock solid. They never abandon their base. Their base is always going to ride or die for them, because the Republicans look out for their base. Democrats, on the other hand, hate their base and say fuck you to their base and do none of the things their base wants them to do. And so this is the result. Only 8% view Democrats very favorably. Democrats have been hoping that a voter backlash against the president will be powerful enough to restore their majority in the House in next year's.
I gotta read this one. But like, I don't think any of this matters. When it comes to the actual elections, he said it earlier, Kyle said earlier, they're gonna vote. They're gonna vote. Democratic vote turnout is good when they decide to go and fucking vote. That's the only concern. I don't care how other people view the fucking Republican Party. I only care about how people view the Democratic Party. I much so care about how current people who vote Democrat, how you actually feel about the methods of the party. That's the people I actually give a fuck about. I don't care about the other party. We already know what they're doing. They're the ones that's currently in power. There's literally nothing we can do about it right now. So letting them go, quote unquote, hang themselves is a good idea. But I mean, like, I think there could be a lot more aggression. There could be a lot more people than just an AOC running around the country doing, post or pre-campaign rallies, or doing rallies in general. There can be a lot more people. Gavin Newsom can go around and start doing that, or somebody else can do it. The Jasmine Crockett's doing her thing. I would like to see more Democrats make a statement, make an impact, so that it's like, okay, well, now I know who you are. It's like, I know who Bernie Sanders, AOC, Jasmine Crockett are. I know Cory Booker. People don't like Cory Booker. That 24-hour speech he did made an impact. You won't forget him, because even if you feel like it was pointless, you know who Cory Booker is, because he did something. So I feel like Hakeem Jeffries, I fucking forget that he's there the majority of the times. So I feel like there needs to be a replacement there. But in actuality, I feel like the Democratic Party needs to come together and say, yo, yo, they're not feeling this shit. Let's get aggressive. Be aggressive.
There's midterm elections, much as it did